Uncanny Valley, Chapter 7, The Door Beneath. Orson pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the church and stepped into a cold, dim interior. In his mind, the echo of that solitary tick still resonated, a sound that confirmed what he intuitively knew. The ancient clock had moved again. Now, the time would read 11:57. Its digits burning into his bones as an inescapable omen. He walked slowly up the creaking pews, each step heavy with dread. As he passed, the blank wooden faces of the mannequins fixed their lifeless eyes upon him, their heads silently tracking his every movement. Their unnerving, unyielding gaze spoke of a watchfulness that chilled him to his core. At the lectern, the battered book lay open. Its pages were entirely blank except for one single, ominous line scrawled in dark, desperate ink. There is no hope of escape. The message reverberated within him, sealing his fate in a whisper of finality. Without warning, the stillness shattered. A deep, resonant toll exploded through the church, its sound so forceful that it seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Overwhelmed by the thunderous clang, Orson crumpled to his knees in agonizing pain. After a few moments of heavy silence, the echo of the toll faded. Summoning what strength he had left, Orson rose and, trembling, made his way toward the bell tower. The narrow staircase creaked beneath his weight as he ascended into shadows. At the top of the tower, he found not the swinging bell he had expected, but a single, battered bell crashed to the floor. Its metal was dulled by time, encrusted with dust and moss, a grim relic of lost sound. Near the fallen bell, a large, cracked mirror hung on the wall. Drawn inexorably to it, Orson approached. As he gazed into the mirror, his heart seized. Not at his own reflection, but at the unmistakable face of his long-deceased uncle. In the silvery surface, the scene shifted. He saw the bell free-falling, its weight crushing his uncle in a final, haunting moment. In that instant, a cold certainty filled him. The church, the toll, the watching mannequins, and even the mirror had conspired to reveal a legacy of despair from which there was no escape. Orson turned away from the cracked mirror, forcing himself to steady the tremors in his hands. The shadow of his uncle's grim fate clung to his mind like cobwebs, whispering promises of his own demise. But Orson wasn't ready to succumb. Not yet. He needed answers. He needed to find his way into the mind beneath the church. Whatever dark truth lay buried below, it beckoned him, pulling at him with a force older than the town itself. If the journal was right, if the old records and whispers of the town were true, then the mine was the key. He retraced his steps down the narrow, winding stairs of the bell tower. The silence felt heavier now, punctuated only by the mute groans of the aged wood beneath his boots. As he reached the sanctuary, the wooden mannequins had changed once more, twisted now in positions of unnatural supplication, their featureless faces turned upward as though crying out to some unseen power. Orson shuddered, quickly moving toward the rear of the sanctuary, guided only by a vague sense of direction and the dim memory of an old door half hidden in the shadows. Sure enough, a door waited at the far end of the church, its edges swollen with moisture and rot. The brass knob turned stiffly under his hand, and the door swung inward to reveal a staircase descending into darkness. He paused at the threshold, listening. Somewhere below, faint and distorted, was a sound he couldn't quite place. It hovered just beyond the range of hearing. He felt, more than heard, a thrumming beneath the surface of reality itself. His fingers gripped the railing, the iron slick and cold beneath his touch as he started down. The basement air hit him immediately, wet, thick, and cold, like stepping into the damp lung of some forgotten beast. His flashlight flickered to life, cutting a narrow path through the suffocating gloom. The stone walls dripped steadily, slick with condensation and mold, and the uneven ground crunched softly underfoot with debris he dared not examine. As he moved deeper into the basement, Orson felt eyes upon him, invisible gazes piercing the darkness. He swung the flashlight around, the beam jittering, searching. But there was nothing, only shadows dancing away from the intrusive light. His foot struck something hard, metallic, sending it skittering loudly across the uneven stone floor. He flinched, and his beam caught the object as it spun to rest. An old, rust-covered mining helmet. He knelt and picked it up, wiping away grime to reveal faded initials carved hastily into its brim. JT. The faintest whispers seemed to emanate from the helmet itself, unintelligible, but tauntingly close to speech. Orson dropped the helmet and moved swiftly on, his breath shallow. The farther he traveled, the colder it became. The walls pressed closer together, narrowing, angling downward as if guiding him toward some hidden destination. The whispers grew louder, echoing gently around him, still indistinct but somehow familiar. He strained to understand, to make sense of the noise. Then, abruptly, they ceased. The air hung impossibly still, charged with expectation. His flashlight beam caught on something ahead, a silhouette standing in the dark. Orson froze, heart thundering. The figure was motionless, and, with shaking hands, Orson raised the flashlight to reveal another mannequin. This one wore an old priest's cassock, moth-eaten and faded, its wooden face crudely carved into a silent scream. He stepped around the grotesque figure carefully, continuing onward until the passageway ended abruptly at a heavy iron door, rusted shut and bound with thick chains. Upon closer inspection, he saw words scratched feverishly into the metal. It waits beneath, it hungers. Orson reached out tentatively to touch the door, his fingers hovering just inches away. Then, from beyond the door, a single knock echoed softly, clearly against the metal. He jerked his hand back, pulse spiking. Another knock followed, then another. A slow, rhythmic tapping that matched perfectly the inexorable ticking in his mind. The whispers rose again around him, closer now, circling him like predatory birds, chattering and laughing in a cruel mockery of human voices. He whirled around, panic mounting, but found nothing. No source, no faces, only oppressive darkness and the ceaseless stripping of the walls. Orson backed away from the sealed door, nearly stumbling in his desperation to escape. He knew he needed to find another way into the mine, another path hidden somewhere within this terrible place. But he couldn't stay in front of this door, couldn't bear its slow, insistent knocking for even one more second. He ran back toward the stairs, his feet splashing through standing puddles of stagnant water. Behind him, the knocking intensified, louder, demanding. The basement echoed with the sound, chasing him upward. He burst through the basement doorway and slammed it shut behind him, collapsing against the frame, breathing raggedly. In the silence that followed, a soft scratching noise trickled up through the wood, like fingernails scraping along the door from the other side. Heart still racing, Orson slid to the floor, head bowed, gripping his hair in his fists. The mine was below that door, beneath his feet, beneath everything. And whatever waited there, whatever terrible thing fed on this town and its people, was waiting for him. He had no choice. He had to go back, but not now. Not yet. Orson stood at the top of the narrow stairs leading back down toward the basement. He could feel the pull of that door even from here, like gravity drawing him inexorably downwards, towards whatever nightmare awaited beneath the church. The revolver in his jacket pocket felt cold and heavy, a grim anchor tethering him to reality. With shaking hands, he pulled it free. The metal gleamed faintly in the muted gray light that filtered through the church windows, a silent promise of protection, or perhaps merely an illusion of it. He steadied his breath, forcing his heart to slow its frantic rhythm. He had run from so much, from memories, from nightmares, from a past that refused to stay buried. But there was nowhere left to run. Uncanny Valley had him. It had always had him. "I'm not afraid," he whispered, his voice more brittle than he intended. He didn't believe the words, but he needed to say them, to hear himself speak them aloud, even if it was only a desperate lie. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the doorknob that led back down into the church's shadowed underbelly. His fingers curled around the cold brass. He took a slow, deep breath. His muscles tensed, his whole body readying itself for whatever lay ahead. But as he began to turn the knob, something flickered at the edge of his vision, a subtle shift, a movement just beyond clarity. Orson froze, hand gripping the door handle, heart hammering painfully. With agonizing slowness, he turned his head. There, framed against the dim glow of the stained-glass window, a silhouette shifted silently. Tall, narrow, familiar, yet impossibly, achingly out of place. He watched as the figure stepped slowly into the pale light, face illuminated just enough to confirm Orson's darkest suspicion. It was his uncle. He stood at the far end of the sanctuary, pale, dressed in the same dark suit from the portrait in the glass manor. His eyes were hollow, sorrowful, accusing. A gaping wound marked his forehead, bloodless yet fresh, as if eternally preserved at the instant of death. "Don't," the figure mouthed silently, his voice echoing clearly inside Orson's mind, though no sound crossed the distance between them. "It's not too late to turn back." Orson's breath shuddered out of him. He shook his head slowly, his voice a cracked whisper. "I have to." His uncle's figure wavered, like an image reflected in disturbed water, then dissolved silently into shadow, leaving Orson once again alone. His grip tightened around the revolver. Whatever waited below, whatever truth lay beyond that door, it wouldn't stop until it had him, or he had faced it. He was done running. With one last breath, he steadied himself, twisting the knob fully and opening the door. The darkness swallowed him immediately. He descended, each step slow, deliberate, his pulse a deafening drumbeat in his ears. The whispers rose again, murmuring unintelligibly, growing louder as he reached the basement. At the far end, the iron door loomed. Orson stood before it, revolver drawn, its heavy metal a comforting presence in his sweating palm. The door thrummed softly, resonating like the bell had before. Its presence felt alive, aware, hungry. The old rusted chains crumbled in his hands like sand. He set his jaw, his fingers resting on the cold metal handle, the whispers now coalescing into a single clear phrase. "We have always been waiting, Orson." With a final shuddering breath, he tightened his grip on the revolver and twisted the knob. The door creaked open. Beyond lay darkness, absolute and infinite, waiting for him, and Orson Glass stepped forward. Tick.